Hi, this is Jim Couri. Today I want to present a series of events that are extremely disquieting involving the Appellate Division, 1st Department in New York. Firstly, you all are probably by now aware that I've had tremendous life experience dealing as a kid in Brooklyn with some of the major politicos such as Johnny Cruz and his group that were really the Tammany Hall of Brooklyn in the 1940s and 50s. But I also had great experience with my old and dear friend Roy Cohn, who is probably one of the most celebrated criminal lawyers that ever lived, other than Sidney Korshak. Roy's dad, Albert, was a judge. And he was a judge in the Appellate Division, I believe also in the 1st Department. So I learned a great deal from Roy about the conduct of judges and the activities of the Appellate Division. But I also had the distinct pleasure of spending a great deal of time with Roy and Carmine DeSapio. Carmine DeSapio was the last bastion of Tammany Hall in New York. Nothing happened in New York without Carmine DeSapio's go-ahead and okay. Carmine DeSapio and Johnny Cruz were good friends, and they were also sometimes adversaries, because each of them would select an appointee, and they would fare for the governor's attention on that appointee. Averell Harriman was sort of like Rockefeller, an elitist. Averell Harriman's family really was in the railroad business, as Rockefeller's family was in the oil business. Now, these guys showed me how these Appellate Division judges worked and how they got appointed to that position. And I learned a little bit about the Appellate Division recently when I found my adversary Joe Burke and John Siebert had spoliated some serious pieces of evidence, particularly a note of issue and certificate of readiness, and hid it for 3 years, allowing the Appellate Division to issue an order faulting me for not complying with discovery that the Appellate Division characterized as being legitimate, when in fact it was not legitimate. It was barred and precluded as a matter of law by the fact that the note of issue and certificate of readiness had been filed by Joe Burke. When I made a motion and called that to the attention of the Appellate Division, I assumed the Appellate Division would be very angry, because judges are usually very upset when litigants, particularly lawyers, lie under oath and secrete evidence. A number of years ago, I was before Howard Schwartzberg in the bankruptcy court, who appointed me a pseudo-trustee, calling it a sole representative in a case in which my company was the largest creditor, and threw out the trustee and made me the trustee, if you will, to pursue claims on behalf of the debtor. I sat in that court one day and I watched an unrelated case where a lawyer told Judge Schwartzberg that his adversary had spoliated evidence, hid it, secreted it, didn't tell anybody about it, and engaged in fraud and perjury before the court, and presented to Judge Schwartzberg the documentary evidence to support his charges. Judge Schwartzberg did what any legitimate judge would do, and that was throw the guy's case out, and said in open court that he was referring the entire matter to the United States Attorney's Office and to the Grievance Committee for prosecution. Now, that's usually what judges do when they're defrauded by a litigant. Now, I learned through DeSapio and Cruz that if a judge has a contract against the litigant, they don't really give a darn about the law at all. They'll do whatever they have to do to screw the guy. The Appellate Division, 1st Department, got my motion, which was very detailed, as to how Joe Burke and John Siebert proceeded to conduct discovery while they secreted the note of issue, and then made a motion saying I had not complied. Justice Heitler, who had the case at the time, threw Burke out. Burke then appealed that decision, and the Appellate Division wrote an order in February of 2008 and said, All legitimate discovery Couri didn't comply with. Couri didn't comply with the appointment of referee Crespo and his orders, and therefore his complaint should be thrown out. All of this was bogus. The complaint should have never been thrown out. Referee Crespo's role was not legitimate because it was pre-note and the note of issue had been filed, and all of the discovery was illegal. The Appellate Division was told that, and they denied my motion with 3 words. Now, that is very shocking. But it's really not that shocking when I tell you what Carmine DeSapio had to say to me many times when I was sitting there with he and Roy at 21 having dinner. And that is, these judges will do anything they're told to do. The law be damned. The law has no bearing on what they do. What has to bear on what they do is what they are told to do. Why would a judge or a series of judges at the Appellate Division throw out documentary evidence of outright fraud on the court? Now, none other than Jay Itkowitz, Mr. Pavilla's lawyer in the landlord matter with the apartment on East 73rd Street, just recently had a case before Judge Ramos. That case involved the spoliation of evidence of Itkowitz's adversary. Judge Ramos stopped the case, sanctioned the defendant in the case in which Itkowitz represents the plaintiff, and demanded that all that evidence that was spoliated be brought forward. That's normally what happens when judges find that there's been a fraud on the court. Here, I produced a tremendous amount of evidence establishing to the Appellate Division there was a major fraud on the Appellate Division and on the trial court. Yet nothing happened. They denied my motion with 3 words. Judge Stallman chooses to do nothing about it. Now, I learned from Johnny Cruz, and I learned from Carmine DeSapio, and I learned from Roy Cohn that these judges dance to the tune of the orchestra leader. Not the law books, not the CPLR, and not integrity, and in God we trust. Something is drastically wrong here, and something has to be done to put a stop to it. I wrote a long letter, you can look at it on Scamraiders, to the Appellate Division First Department a few months ago. I wrote that letter from my heart because I genuinely believed that the system's got to change. These people, just because they have black robes, doesn't make them better than you or I or anybody else who's trying their best to have justice served. Corruption has to stop. I saw it in living color with Johnny Cruz. I saw it in living color with Roy. I saw it with DeSapio. I saw it with Morehouse. I saw how these governors, who are honorable, decent guys, had to rely on the politicos for making appointments. They don't know what's going on. They rely on the Cruzes and the DeSapios and the other people that are running the town, and they're relying solely on the people that are running the courts. I want to thank all of you for listening to this tape. I promise you there will be extensive follow-ups and more details about my relationship with Roy and Carmine DeSapio and Johnny Cruz and many, many others. Thank you.